I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who gets cheated on. You know the type. The ones who seem so put together, so confident, so in control of their lives. That was me, Lauren Matthews, successful marketing executive with the perfect marriage and the perfect home. At least, that's what I thought until I walked into my own office last Tuesday afternoon. I'd forgotten my laptop charger and decided to swing by the house before my evening client meeting. Marcus's car wasn't in the driveway, which was strange since he'd said he was working from home that day. But Charlotte's silver BMW was parked right where mine usually sat. Charlotte, my secretary, 24 years old, legs that went on for miles, and a smile that could melt steel. I'd hired her 6 months ago, impressed by her credentials and work ethic. She was efficient, professional, and had quickly become indispensable to my daily operations. I should have seen the signs. The front door was unlocked. Another red flag I chose to ignore. I called out as I entered, but got no response. The house felt different somehow, charged with an energy that made my skin crawl even before I understood why. I climbed the stairs toward my home office. The sound of my heels muffled the thick carpet. That's when I heard it, a soft moan, followed by my husband's unmistakable laugh. The same laugh I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. My hand froze on the office door handle. Part of me wanted to turn around, pretend I was home, never heard anything. But I couldn't. I had to know. I pushed the door open. There they were on my desk, surrounded by the quarterly reports I'd been working on all week. Marcus's hands were tangled in Charlotte's perfect blonde hair. Her skirt hiked up around her waist. They were so lost in each other that they didn't even notice me standing there. For what felt like an eternity, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just stood there watching my entire world crumble into dust. Lauren. Marcus jumped back like he'd been electrocuted, his face going white as Charlotte scrambled to adjust her clothes. I can explain. Don't. The word came out as barely a whisper, but it stopped him cold. Just don't. Charlotte wouldn't meet my eyes. This woman I'd trusted, confided in, treated like family. She grabbed her purse and practically ran from the room, leaving Marcus and me alone in the wreckage of our marriage. Lauren, please let me. I turned and walked away. I couldn't listen to his excuses, his lies, his desperate attempts to explain away what I'd just witnessed. I grabbed my keys and left, driving aimlessly through the streets of our neighborhood until I found myself parked outside Romano's coffee house downtown. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, shaking, not from cold, but from the shock of it all. How long had this been going on? How many times had they used my office, my home, my trust against me? Finally, I forced myself to go inside. The coffee shop was nearly empty, except for a few students with laptops and an older couple sharing a piece of cake. I ordered a large coffee I didn't want and found a corner booth where I could fall apart in relative privacy. That's when the tears came. 8 years of marriage gone. My career compromised by having to work so closely with Charlotte. my home violated by their betrayal. I put my head in my hands and let myself cry for the first time in years. "Excuse me, are you all right?" I looked up to see a man standing beside my table, concern written across his features. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it. His eyes were the deepest brown I'd ever seen, and they were looking at me with genuine worry. "I'm sorry," I managed, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "I'm fine. Here." He pulled a clean napkin from the dispenser on my table and offered it to me. "You don't look fine, if you don't mind me saying." I took the napkin gratefully, studying his face. There was something about him that felt safe, trustworthy. Maybe it was the way he kept a respectful distance, or how his voice was gentle without being condescending. "Thank you," I said, dabbing at my eyes. "I'm having what you might call the worst day of my life." He gestured to the empty seat across from me. "Mind if I sit? I'm Brian, and I have a few minutes before I need to pick up my daughter's birthday cake." "Lauren," I nodded, surprising myself by wanting the company. "And yes, please sit." Brian settled into the booth, his presence somehow calming the storm in my chest. He had strong hands, I noticed, with a thin white scar across his left knuckle. There was something comforting about the way he moved, deliberate, but not rushed. "Want to talk about it?" he asked, wrapping his hands around his own coffee cup. Sometimes strangers are the best listeners. I found myself studying his face, the slight lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, the way his jaw was set with quiet strength. "I just discovered my husband cheating with my secretary in my home office, on my desk." Brian winced. "Jesus, I'm sorry, Lauren, that's brutal. The worst part is, I should have seen it coming." I shook my head, fresh tears threatening. All the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way he'd light up whenever Charlotte walked into a room. I was so naive. "You weren't naive," Brian said firmly. "You trusted the people you should be able to trust. That's not a character flaw. That's being human." Something in his tone made me look at him more closely. "You sound like you speak from experience." He nodded, his expression darkening slightly. "My ex-wife left me for her personal trainer last year. Found out she'd been seeing him for months while I was working overtime to pay for their gym sessions together." He let out a bitter laugh. Talk about adding insult to injury. "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, but I meant them. How do you get past something like that?" "One day at a time," he said, meeting my eyes. "Some days are harder than others, but you find your footing eventually. You realize that their betrayal says nothing about your worth as a person." When he looked at me like that, with such intensity and understanding, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, not just attraction, though there was definitely that Brian was undeniably handsome in a rugged, authentic way that Marcus had never been. But more than that, I felt seen, truly seen for the first time in forever. "You have kind eyes," I heard myself say, then immediately felt heat rise in my cheeks. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. I'm not thinking clearly. Don't apologize." Brian's voice had dropped to something softer, more intimate, And for what it's worth, you have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. Even when they're filled with tears, the air between us shifted, charged with something electric and dangerous, and completely unexpected. I should have looked away, should have thanked him and left. Instead, I found myself leaning forward slightly, drawn to him like a moth to flame. I should go, I whispered, even as every fiber of my being wanted to stay. Should and want are two different things, Brian said quietly, his gaze never leaving mine. He was right. And in that moment, sitting across from this beautiful stranger who saw my pain and offered comfort instead of judgment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, my story wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning. The next morning, I told myself I wouldn't go back to that coffee shop. I had enough complications in my life without adding a mysterious, devastatingly attractive stranger to the mix. But as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the cold toast, I couldn't bring myself to eat while Marcus showered upstairs. I found myself reaching for my keys. 20 minutes later, I was walking through those familiar glass doors, my heart racing with anticipation I refused to acknowledge. Brian wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. What were the chances? I ordered my usual latte and settled into a corner table, laptop open, pretending to work on the Henderson account while secretly scanning every face that walked in. "Fancy meeting you here again," came that low, familiar voice behind me. I turned, and there he was, Brian, looking even more handsome in the morning light streaming through the windows. He wore a simple gray Henley that hugged his chest in all the right places, and when he smiled, those laugh lines around his eyes crinkled in a way that made my stomach flutter. "Oh, hi," I said, hoping I sounded casual instead of breathless. "I didn't expect to see you." "Liar," he said with a grin, sliding into the chair across from me without invitation. "You hoped you'd see me just as much as I hoped I'd see you." He was right, and we both knew it. The honesty was refreshing after years of Marcus's careful deflections and half-truths. "How's today treating you?" Brian asked, his voice gentler now. "Better now," I admitted, then caught myself. "I mean, it's fine. Work, you know." "Lauren." The way he said my name made something warm spread through my chest. "You don't have to pretend with me. Yesterday, you discovered your husband cheating. Today isn't just fine." I closed my laptop slowly, giving up the pretense. "You're right. I barely slept. I keep replaying it, walking into my own home office and seeing them together. Charlotte had her legs wrapped around him, and they were so passionate. Marcus hasn't looked at me like that in years." Brian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's his loss and his failure, not yours." "Is it though?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Maybe if I'd been more exciting, more adventurous, more something. Maybe if I hadn't gained weight after Sarah was born, or if I'd worn prettier lingerie, or... "Stop." Brian's hand covered mine on the table, his touch warm and firm. "Don't you dare blame yourself for his choices." The contact sent electricity shooting up my arm. I should have pulled away, should have remembered I was still technically married. Instead, I found myself turning my palm up, letting our fingers intertwine. "Tell me about Emma," I said, desperate to change the subject before I did something irreversible. His whole face softened. "She's 8, going on 18, smart as a whip, and stubborn as her old man. I have her Wednesday nights and every other weekend, which never feels like enough." "What's she like?" "Fierce, independent. She's got these wild curls that she refuses to let anyone tame, and she reads everything she can get her hands on." He pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of a beautiful little girl with Brian's eyes and an infectious grin. "She wants to be a veterinarian astronaut when she grows up." I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in days. "That's very specific. She says someone needs to take care of the space animals." His thumb brushed across my knuckles, a gesture so small and intimate it made my breath catch. "What about Sarah? What's she like?" "At 15 and convinced I'm the most embarrassing person alive," I said with a smile. "But she's brilliant. Honor roll, debate team, already planning her college applications. She wants to study international relations. She sounds amazing. Takes after her mom, I bet." The compliment made me blush like a teenager. When was the last time Marcus had said something like that about me? We talked for 2 hours. About everything and nothing. His work as a contractor, my marketing job, books we'd read, places we wanted to travel. Brian listened with his whole body, leaning forward, asking follow-up questions, remembering details. He made me feel fascinating, like every word I said mattered. When I finally glanced at my phone, I gasped. "I have to go. I'm supposed to meet a client in 20 minutes, same time tomorrow." He asked as we stood. "I shouldn't," I said, even as I nodded yes. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woody and masculine that made me want to bury my face in his neck. "Lauren, I know this is complicated, but I haven't felt this connected to someone in years." "Have you?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "Then don't overthink it. Just be here tomorrow, please." That evening, as Marcus worked late again, or claimed to, I found myself in front of my closet, trying on different outfits for the next day. I told myself I was just updating my professional wardrobe, but I knew better. I chose a soft blue blouse that brought out my eyes and a skirt that showed off my legs. For Brian, the pattern continued for a week. Every morning, we'd meet at the coffee shop. Every afternoon, I'd make excuses to Marcus about client meetings that didn't exist. Brian and I exchanged numbers on day 3, ostensibly so I could send him a link to an article we'd discussed, but our texts quickly evolved beyond friendship. Brian, "Good morning, beautiful. Coffee in 10. Me, shouldn't you be working?" Brian, "Can't concentrate knowing you're out there somewhere, probably overthinking everything." Me, "I don't overthink everything." Brian, "Sure you don't. See you soon." On Friday, we ran into each other at the grocery store. I was in the produce section, debating between organic and regular strawberries, when I felt someone behind me. "The organic ones are sweeter," Brian said, his breath warm against my ear. I spun around, my heart hammering. Are you following me? Just lucky, I guess. His eyes sparkled with mischief, though I have to say, you make grocery shopping look incredibly sexy. I laughed despite myself. You're terrible, terribly charming, you mean. We walked through the store together, our conversation flowing as easily as always. When we reached the checkout, Brian insisted on paying for my groceries. It felt domestic, intimate, like we were a real couple doing mundane couple things. In the parking lot, as we loaded our bags, Brian caught my hand. Lauren, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. My pulse quickened. Are you happy? Really, truly happy in your marriage? The question hung between us like a challenge. I could lie, could pretend everything was fine, could walk away from whatever this was becoming. Or I could be honest with him and with myself. No, I whispered. I haven't been happy in years, maybe ever. He stepped closer, his free hand coming up to cup my cheek. Then, what are you going to do about it? I leaned into his touch, my eyes fluttering closed. I don't know. This is all so complicated, Brian. I have a daughter, a life, responsibilities. I'm not asking you to run away with me tomorrow, he said softly. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe you deserve to be happy. Maybe you deserve to be with someone who sees how incredible you are. When I opened my eyes, he was looking at me with such tenderness, such want, that I nearly kissed him right there in the Whole Foods parking lot. Instead, I stepped back, my hand falling from his. I should go, I said, hating how the words tasted. Should, he repeated with a sad smile. There's that word again. As I drove home, my mind raced. I was falling for Brian hard and fast and completely. But I was also terrified. What would happen to Sarah if I left Marcus? What would happen to my career, my friendships, my entire carefully constructed life? But then I thought about Charlotte's legs around my husband, about years of feeling invisible and undesired, about the way Brian looked at me like I was the most fascinating woman in the world. What would you tell your best friend if she was in my situation? Comment below. The next morning, I woke up with Brian's words echoing in my mind. Maybe you deserve to be happy. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Marcus shower, and felt like a stranger in my own life. I couldn't focus at work. Every email felt meaningless, every meeting a waste of time. When Charlotte walked past my office in her tight pencil skirt, I felt nothing but disgust. How long had she been sleeping with my husband? How many lies had I swallowed? Around noon, my phone buzzed. Brian, can we meet? I can't stop thinking about yesterday. My fingers trembled as I typed back. Where? Coffee shop in an hour. It's supposed to rain. I arrived first, ordering my usual latte with shaking hands. When Brian walked in, water droplets clinging to his dark hair, my heart did that familiar flip. He slid into the booth across from me, his green eyes intense. I barely slept, he said without preamble. Neither did I. Lauren, I need you to know this isn't just some midlife crisis thing for me. What I feel for you. He reached across the table, his fingers finding mine. It's real. It's terrifying. but it's real. Outside, thunder rumbled. The first drops of rain began pattering against the windows. "I keep thinking about what you said," I whispered, "about deserving to be happy. But Brian, I don't even know what that looks like anymore." "Now tell me about your marriage," he said gently. "Really tell me." The words came pouring out then. Years of feeling invisible, of Marcus treating me like a roommate rather than a wife, the gradual erosion of intimacy, the way he looked right through me at dinner parties, how he'd started working late more and more often. "I used to think it was normal," I said, tears threatening, "that this was just what marriage became after a while. But seeing him with Charlotte, the way he touched her, looked at her, he used to look at me like that." Once, Brian's thumb traced circles on my knuckles. "When was the last time he made you feel beautiful?" The question hit like a physical blow. "I honestly can't remember." "That's not normal, Lauren. That's not what marriage should be." And the rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the roof. Other customers hurried out into the storm, leaving us almost alone. "What about you?" I asked. "Your divorce." His jaw tightened. Jennifer wanted the life I could provide, not me. The house, the status, the security. But she never wanted me. When I lost my job 2 years ago, she couldn't leave fast enough. "I'm sorry, don't be." It taught me what I actually want in a partner. Someone who sees me, really sees me. Someone who wants to know what I'm thinking, what makes me laugh, what keeps me up at night. His eyes locked on mine. "Someone like you." And the air between us felt electric, charged like the storm outside. "Brian, come with me," he said suddenly. "Where?" "To my car. I can't say what I want to say here." We ran through the rain, Brian's hand warm in mine. His car was parked around back, an older Honda Civic that somehow felt more intimate than any luxury vehicle. We tumbled inside, both of us breathless and soaked. "God, you're beautiful," he whispered, reaching over to brush wet hair from my face. Before I could respond, his lips were on mine. The kiss was everything I'd imagined and more. Soft at first, tentative, then deeper as I responded. His hands tangled in my damp hair, and I found myself pressing closer, my fingers clutching the front of his shirt. "Lauren," he breathed against my mouth, and the way he said my name made something inside me break open. I kissed him back with years of pent-up longing, tasting coffee and rain and possibility. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer across the center console. The windows were fogging up around us as the storm raged outside. "I want you," he whispered, his lips trailing down my neck. "God, Lauren, I want you so much." "I want you too," I confessed, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "But Brian, I'm still married. I have a daughter. This is so complicated." And he pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against mine. I know it's complicated, but what if we gave ourselves this, just once, to see what this could be?" My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure he could hear it. "What are you saying?" "Meet me tomorrow. There's a small hotel downtown, the Riverside Inn. Nothing fancy, but it's quiet, private. Meet me there at 2. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings, but it was drowned out by the need coursing through my veins. When was the last time someone had looked at me with such naked desire? When had I felt this alive? Room 237, he continued, his thumb tracing my bottom lip. If you're there, we'll figure out the rest. If you're not, I'll understand. I couldn't speak, could only nod. He kissed me again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the taste of me. When we finally broke apart, the storm had passed, leaving only the gentle patter of raindrops on the roof. I should go, I whispered, though every cell in my body protested. Tomorrow, he said, his voice rough with want. 2 o'clock, I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling from his kisses. Marcus was already asleep when I got there, and I was grateful. I needed time to think, to process what was happening to me. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to my husband's steady breathing, I realized I'd already made my decision for the first time in years, maybe ever. I was going to do something purely for myself. I was going to choose happiness, even if it meant crossing a line I could never uncross. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I told Marcus I had a doctor's appointment, hating how easily the lie rolled off my tongue. At 1:45, I stood outside the Riverside Inn, my hands shaking as I pushed through the lobby doors. Room 237 was on the second floor. I knocked softly. Brian opened the door immediately, like he'd been waiting right there. He'd changed into dark jeans and a gray sweater that brought out his eyes. The room behind him was simple, but clean, a double bed with white linens, a small table by the window. You came, he said softly. I almost didn't, but you did. He stepped aside to let me in, closing the door behind us with a quiet click. We stood there for a moment, the weight of what we were about to do settling between us. Lauren, he said, reaching for my hands, we don't have to do anything you're not ready for. We can just talk, just be together. But I was tired of talking, tired of being careful and responsible and good. I stepped closer, rising on my toes to kiss him. This time, there was no hesitation. His arms came around me, pulling me flush against him, and I melted into his embrace. He was gentle, but passionate, his hands reverent as they explored the curves of my body. You're so beautiful, he murmured against my skin, making me feel like a goddess instead of a discarded wife. What happened next was tender and intense, passionate yet careful. Brian made me feel cherished, desired, alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Every touch, every whispered endearment, every gentle caress made me feel like I was coming back to myself. Afterward, we lay entwined, my head on his chest, his fingers stroking through my hair. No regrets, he asked quietly. I should have regrets, I said honestly, but I don't. Is that terrible? It's human, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Lauren, I need you to know this isn't just physical for me. What we have, it's real. I lifted my head to look at him, seeing nothing but sincerity in his green eyes. I know, I whispered. It's real for me too. As I drove home later, I felt like a different woman, Guilty, yes, but also liberated. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. I'd crossed the line. There was no going back now. The next few weeks fell into a dangerous rhythm. I became someone I didn't recognize, a woman who could smile at her husband over morning coffee while planning afternoon escapes with another man every Tuesday and Thursday. I told Marcus I had client meetings downtown. Instead, I'd drive to the Riverside Inn, where Brian would already be waiting in room 237. The white linens became as familiar as my own bedroom, maybe more so, because they held passion instead of indifference. "You're glowing," Brian said one afternoon, tracing patterns on my bare shoulder as we lay tangled together. The late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting golden light across his face. "Am I?" I asked, though I knew he was right. I'd started wearing lipstick again, choosing clothes that made me feel beautiful instead of just appropriate. The gray sweater I'd worn the day we first kissed had been replaced by softer fabrics, brighter colors. "Radiant," he confirmed, pressing a kiss to my collarbone. "It suits you." Yet the guilt was still there, a constant weight in my chest, but it was balanced by something else: joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy that I hadn't felt in years. At home, Marcus noticed the changes too, but in his typical fashion, he attributed them to work stress. "You seem different lately," he said one evening, looking up from his laptop as I applied moisturizer at my vanity. "More energetic, just feeling better about the Peterson account," I lied smoothly, meeting his eyes in the mirror, finally making some progress. He nodded and returned to his screen. Charlotte was probably texting him. The thought should have hurt more than it did. Brian started talking about Emma more frequently during our stolen afternoons. His daughter was 7, with curly brown hair and his green eyes, and she lived with her mother most of the time. "She's been asking about you," he said one Thursday, his fingers playing with mine as we lay in the afterglow. "About me?" My heart skipped. How does she even know I exist? I may have mentioned that Daddy has a friend named Lauren who makes him smile a lot, he admitted, looking almost bashful. "She wants to meet the lady who makes Daddy happy." But the implications hung heavy between us. Meeting his daughter would make this real in a way that went beyond afternoon hotel rooms. It would mean thinking about futures, about the possibility of something more than stolen moments. "Brian," I started, but he pressed a finger to my lips. "I know it's complicated. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready for. But Lauren, Emma, is my world. Anyone who's going to be part of my life needs to understand that." Yet the weight of his words settled over me. This wasn't just about us anymore. There was a little girl involved, an innocent child who deserved stability and security. "I want to meet her," I heard myself say, surprising us both. "When you're ready, when it's right." His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Really, really?" 2 days later, fate intervened. I was at Riverside Park, needing air and space to think, when I heard a familiar laugh. Brian was pushing a small girl on the swings, both of them grinning as she soared higher and higher. Higher, Daddy, higher, she called out, her curls flying behind her. Any higher and you'll fly to the moon, he called back, catching sight of me standing by the oak trees. His expression shifted to surprise, then warmth. Emma noticed his distraction and turned to see what he was looking at. When she spotted me, she jumped off the swing mid-arc, landing with practiced ease. "Are you Lauren?" she asked, skipping over to me with the fearless confidence of childhood. "Daddy said you have pretty eyes." He was right, they're like chocolate. I glanced at Brian, who looked both mortified and amused. Yes, I'm Lauren. And you must be Emma. Your daddy talks about you all the time." "He does," she beamed, then grabbed my hand with surprising boldness. "Want to see how high I can swing? Daddy says I'm going to be in the Olympics someday." Before I could answer, she was dragging me toward the playground equipment. Brian followed, shaking his head with a rueful smile. "She's not usually this forward with strangers," he said quietly, as Emma demonstrated her swinging technique. "I don't feel like a stranger," I admitted, watching his daughter with growing fondness. She was chattering away about her school play, her best friend's pet hamster, and her plans to build a treehouse. Everything about her was bright and alive and wonderful. "Can Lauren come have ice cream with us?" Emma asked suddenly, appearing at my elbow with grass stains on her knees and hope in her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure Lauren has things to do." Brian started, but I found myself shaking my head. "Actually, ice cream sounds perfect." We spent the next hour at the little shop near the park, Emma regaling us with stories, while chocolate chip ice cream dripped down her chin. She was funny and smart and completely charming, and watching Brian with her made my chest ache with something I couldn't name. This was what a family looked like. Real messy, full of laughter and love. "I like her," Emma announced to her father as I excused myself to use the restroom. Her voice carried, and I heard Brian's soft reply. "I like her too, Em. Very much. Is she going to be my new mommy?" But the question hit me like a physical blow. I leaned against the bathroom door, hands shaking as the reality of the situation crashed over me. This wasn't just an affair anymore. There were real people involved, real hearts at stake. When I returned to the table, Brian's eyes searched my face, reading my expression with uncanny accuracy. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I lied, forcing a smile for Emma's benefit. But as I drove home later, Emma's innocent question echoed in my mind. Was I ready to be someone's new mommy? Was I ready to leave Marcus, to blow up my entire life for the possibility of something real with Brian and his daughter? At home, I found Marcus in the kitchen, heating up leftover Chinese takeout. "Where were you?" he asked without looking up from his phone. "Park," I said truthfully. "Needed some fresh air." Charlotte chose that moment to text him. I could tell by the way his fingers moved rapidly across the screen, the slight smile that played at his lips. Once, that would have destroyed me. Now, it barely registered. I was moving through the motions of my old life, while my heart lived somewhere else entirely. The deception was becoming easier, which scared me more than the guilt ever had. Later that night, as Marcus slept beside me, my phone buzzed with a text from Brian. Emma hasn't stopped talking about you. She asked if you could come to her school play next Friday. I stared at the message in the dark, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. This was another line, another step deeper into a life that wasn't quite mine yet. I'd love to, I typed back. If you've ever been tempted by someone you shouldn't have been, hit that like button. Because sometimes temptation isn't about wanting something wrong. Sometimes it's about recognizing something right that comes at the wrong time. The next few days passed in a blur of stolen moments and careful lies. I found myself checking my phone constantly for Brian's messages, living for those brief windows when I could escape to meet him. The anticipation was intoxicating. The way my pulse quickened when I saw his name on my screen, the electric current that ran through me every time our fingers brushed. But I should have been more careful. I should have noticed the silver BMW that seemed to appear in too many parking lots lately. Thursday afternoon, I left work early under the pretense of a dentist appointment. Brian had texted that he could meet me for coffee before picking up Emma from school. We'd developed this routine, these precious stolen hours that felt more real than anything else in my life. I met him at our usual spot, a small cafe on Maple Street, far enough from my office that I felt safe. He was already there when I arrived, wearing that gray sweater that made his eyes look impossibly blue. The sight of him still took my breath away. "You look stressed," he said, standing to kiss my cheek as I slid into the booth across from him. "Just work stuff," I lied, not wanting to tell him about the growing paranoia I'd been feeling, the sense that I was being watched. We talked about everything and nothing. Emma's upcoming school play, his job at the consulting firm, my frustrations with the quarterly reports, normal conversations that felt extraordinary simply because they were with him. An hour later, we walked to his car together. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and for a moment, I let myself imagine this was my real life, that I could take his hand openly, that we didn't have to sneak around like teenagers. "I have to go," I said reluctantly as we reached his Honda Civic. "I know." He pulled me close, his hands settling on my waist. But not yet. The kiss was slow and deep, the kind that made me forget where we were, forget everything except the taste of his lips and the way his fingers tangled in my hair. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless. "I'll see you tomorrow," he whispered against my forehead. "Always," I promised. I was floating as I walked to my car, still feeling the warmth of his touch on my skin. I didn't notice the figure emerging from behind the row of parked cars until it was too late. Well, Charlotte's voice cut through my euphoria like a blade. "This is interesting." My blood turned to ice. She stood there in her perfectly tailored black dress, her phone in her hand, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips. "Charlotte." My voice came out as barely a whisper. "Don't worry, Lauren. I got some great shots." She held up her phone, and I could see the photo on the screen, Brian and me, locked in that passionate embrace. The lighting was perfect, very romantic. Panic flooded through me. What do you want? Smart question. She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the asphalt. See, I've been wondering how you've been managing to leave work so early lately. Following you has been quite educational. My hands were shaking. You followed me. For weeks, her smile was predatory. Amazing what people do when they think no one's watching. Though I have to say, he's much more attractive than Marcus. I can see the appeal. The hypocrisy of it hit me like a slap. You're sleeping with my husband, and now you're sleeping with someone else's. We're quite the pair, aren't we? She laughed, a cold sound that made my skin crawl. But here's the thing, I'm not the one with a reputation to protect. I'm not the one married to the senior partner's golf buddy. She was right, and we both knew it. In our social circle, in Marcus's world, I had everything to lose. What do you want? I repeated. The promotion to senior accounts manager. 50% salary increase, and I want my own office. The corner one with the view. I stared at her in disbelief. I can't just give you a promotion, Charlotte. There are procedures. Then you better figure it out. She tucked her phone into her purse. You have until Monday to make it happen. Or Marcus gets a very interesting photo album. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Lauren, I'd be more careful about where you park if I were you. You never know who might be watching. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after she left, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The walls were closing in. My husband was cheating with my secretary, who was now blackmailing me over my affair with a man who, what exactly was Brian to me? That question became even more complicated the next evening. I was at Brian's apartment, having dinner, while Emma was at a sleepover. We'd ordered pizza and were watching a movie on his couch, my head on his shoulder, when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I should take this. It's Sarah. Sarah, his ex-wife. Emma's mother. I sat up, suddenly alert. Of course. He stepped into the kitchen to answer, but his apartment was small, and I could hear every word. Sarah, what's wrong? Slow down. You want to what? When? I don't know if that's a good idea. She's been gone for 2 years. Yes, I know she asks about you. My stomach dropped. I strained to hear more. We can't just pick up where we left off, because a lot. No, I'm not seeing anyone serious. Not seeing anyone serious. The words hit me like a physical blow. Look, if you're really ready to be in Emma's life again. Yes, she deserves to have her mother. I know you were struggling. Okay, we can meet for coffee and talk. Sunday, all right. Yes, I'll think about what you said. He was quiet for a long moment before returning to the living room. I was pretending to watch the movie, but my entire body was tense. Everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Yeah, it's just. He ran a hand through his hair. Sarah wants to come back to San Francisco. She says she's got her life together now, wants to be a mother to Emma again. That's good, right? For Emma. I don't know. He sat down beside me, but the easy intimacy from moments before was gone. Emma's been asking about her mother more lately, especially since she met you. The implication hung in the air between us. Was I just a placeholder, a substitute mother figure, until the real one came back? She wants us to try again, he said quietly. As a family, for Emma's sake. I felt like I was drowning. Charlotte's threats, Marcus's betrayal, and now this, the possibility that everything I'd risked might be slipping away. What did you tell her? I managed to ask. That I'd think about it. He looked at me, his eyes conflicted. Emma deserves to have both her parents, if we can make it work. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Of course he would consider it. Of course Emma came first. She should come first. But as I drove home that night, one thought echoed in my mind. I was caught between a husband who'd betrayed me, a secretary who was blackmailing me, and a man who might choose his ex-wife over me. For the first time since this all began, I wondered if I was fighting for something that was never really mine to begin with. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. The weight of Charlotte's blackmail, Brian's uncertainty about Sarah, and my own crumbling marriage was suffocating me. I sat in my car outside our house, hands shaking as I stared at the front door. I had to tell Marcus. Whatever happened next, I couldn't live with this secret eating me alive. I found him in his home office, the same place where I'd discovered him with Charlotte. The irony wasn't lost on me. He looked up from his laptop, surprised to see me standing in the doorway at 9 in the morning. Lauren, shouldn't you be at work? We need to talk. My voice came out steadier than I felt. About us, about everything. Marcus closed his laptop, giving me his attention. For a moment, he looked like the man I'd married 5 years ago, concerned, caring. But I knew better now. I know about Charlotte. Stepping into the room, I've known for weeks. His face went pale, then red. Lauren, I can explain. I don't want your explanations. I moved closer to his desk, my hands gripping the back of the chair I'd sat in countless times. I want a divorce. What? No, Lauren, wait. He stood up quickly, knocking over his coffee mug. The dark liquid spread across his quarterly reports. We can work through this. It doesn't have to mean there's more, I interrupted, my heart hammering against my ribs. I've been seeing someone too. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. Then his expression shifted, and I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine shock mixed with what looked almost like admiration. Who? He asked quietly. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we're both. Actually, it does matter. His voice was getting stronger, more controlled. How long? Marcus, how long, Lauren? A few weeks. I lifted my chin, refusing to feel ashamed. Since I found you with Charlotte. He walked around the desk slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. When he was close enough to touch me, he stopped. You know what? He said, and there was something almost excited in his voice. Maybe this is perfect. I blinked What? Think about it, Lauren. We both have interests outside our marriage. Maybe we don't need to end everything. Maybe we just need to be more open about our arrangements. The blood in my veins turned to ice. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stay married. You can have your little affair, and I can have Charlotte. We maintain the house, the image, the life we've built. Everyone gets what they want. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. You want me to be okay with you sleeping with our secretary. I want us both to be adults about this. He reached for my hand, but I jerked it away. Charlotte understands her place. She knows I'll never leave you for her. And apparently, you understand yours too, since you're having your own fun on the side. At my place, the words came out as a whisper. My wife, the woman I come home to, the woman who hosts our dinner parties and looks perfect on my arm at company events. His smile was cold, calculated. Charlotte is recreational, just like your mystery man, I assume. Disgust rose in my throat like bile. You're sick. I'm practical. We can make this work, Lauren. We can have it all. No, I backed toward the door. No, we can't. I want a divorce, Marcus. I want out of this marriage. His expression darkened. Think carefully about what you're saying. Think about what you'll lose. I'm not losing anything worth keeping. But that's when I heard the sharp intake of breath behind me. I turned to see Charlotte standing in the doorway, her face white with shock and something that looked like devastation. You'll never leave her for me. Charlotte's voice was barely audible. You said you loved me. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking trapped. Charlotte, you're not supposed to be here today. I brought the Henderson files you requested. She held up a manila folder with shaking hands. I heard voices and thought. I thought maybe you were finally telling her about us, about how we're going to be together. But the silence stretched between the three of us like a taut wire. I could see the exact moment Charlotte's fantasy shattered. Her eyes filled with tears, but they quickly turned hard. Well, she said, her voice gaining strength, if I can't have you, Marcus, then she can't have her perfect little secret either. My stomach dropped. Charlotte, don't. His name is Brian Morrison, Charlotte announced, looking directly at Marcus. They meet at the Riverside Inn, room 237, every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 weeks. Marcus's face went from confused to furious in seconds. Brian Morrison, the contractor, you know him? I asked weakly. He's bidding on the Morrison Creek development. Jesus, Lauren, do you have any idea what you've done? Marcus's voice was rising. If this gets out, it could ruin the entire deal. Millions of dollars. Oh, now you care about consequences. I shot back. This is different. You're sleeping with someone who could destroy my business. Your business? I laughed bitterly. What about our marriage? What about? The doorbell rang, cutting through our argument. We all froze, staring at each other like children caught stealing cookies. Are you expecting someone? Marcus asked. I shook my head, but my heart was already sinking. Through the window, I could see Brian's truck in our driveway. Charlotte smiled coldly. This should be interesting. I rushed to the front door before Marcus could stop me. But he was right behind me. I opened it to find Brian standing on our porch, his face creased with worry. "Lauren, thank God. I've been calling you all morning. When you didn't answer, I got worried after last night." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Marcus behind me. "You must be Brian," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false politeness. "I'm Marcus, Lauren's husband." Brian's eyes met mine, and I saw understanding dawn in them. He straightened his shoulders, squaring off with Marcus. "I came to check on Lauren. She seemed upset when she left last night." "Left from where exactly?" Marcus asked, though we all knew he already had his answer. "From my apartment." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus stepped forward, and I could see the rage building behind his controlled facade. "Get off my property," Marcus said quietly, "and stay away from my wife." "That's not your decision to make," Brian replied, his voice equally quiet but firm. "It's Lauren's. Actually, it's not." Marcus pulled out his phone. "See, I know all about your custody battle, Morrison. I know how hard you've been fighting to keep your daughter. What do you think a judge would say about a man who seduces married women? About someone who breaks up families?" Brian's face went white. "You bastard." "Careful," Marcus smiled. "I have witnesses to your threatening behavior. Charlotte, you saw him become aggressive, didn't you?" Charlotte nodded eagerly, seeing her chance for revenge. "Absolutely. Very threatening." I stepped between them, my hands shaking. "Stop it. Both of you, just stop." And Brian looked at me, his eyes filled with pain and understanding. "Lauren, I'm sorry. I never wanted to make things harder for you." "How touching," Marcus sneered. "The homewrecker has a conscience." That's when Brian's control finally snapped. He lunged forward, and I screamed as Marcus stumbled backward. The two men grappled briefly before I managed to wedge myself between them. "Enough," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "This is insane. We're all acting like children. If you've ever been tempted by someone you shouldn't have been, hit that like button." Brian stepped back first, his chest heaving. "I won't let you use Emma against me," he said to Marcus. "And I won't let you hurt Lauren anymore." "You're the one hurting her," Marcus shot back. "You're the one who seduced a married woman. You're the homewrecker here." "No," I said quietly, finding my voice. "We all hurt each other, but it's over now." I looked between the two men, my husband who wanted to use me, and the man I loved who might lose his daughter because of me. Charlotte stood in the background, satisfaction written across her face at the chaos she'd helped create. "I want you all to leave," I said. "Marcus, go to a hotel." "Charlotte, you're fired." "Brian," my voice broke. "Brian, I think you should go home to Emma," as they filed out one by one, leaving me standing alone in the wreckage of my life. I realized that sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just shows you how trapped you really were. The silence in my empty house was deafening. 3 days had passed since the confrontation, and I'd barely left my bedroom. Empty coffee cups lined my nightstand like monuments to my inability to function. My phone buzzed constantly, missed calls from Marcus, texts from Brian that I couldn't bring myself to read, and increasingly frantic messages from my assistant asking about client meetings. I'd completely forgotten. I knew I had to move. I knew I had to do something. But every time I tried to stand, the weight of what I'd destroyed pressed me back down onto the unmade bed. The doorbell rang, making me jump. Through the window, I saw a delivery truck, more papers from Marcus's lawyer, probably. The divorce papers had arrived yesterday. He was moving fast, probably trying to protect his assets before I could think clearly enough to fight back. But it wasn't legal documents. It was a box from my office, delivered with a terse note from HR. Personal belongings. Building security will escort you if you need anything else. My hands shook as I opened it. My coffee mug with the chip on the handle, the small, succulent Brian had given me weeks ago, now wilted from neglect. A few framed photos that seemed to mock me from another lifetime. At the bottom was a manila envelope with my name written in Charlotte's precise handwriting. Inside were copies of her photographs, me kissing Brian in the parking lot, us holding hands at the coffee shop, walking into the Riverside Inn. But also something else, printouts of emails between Marcus and Charlotte dating back 6 months. Not just affair, emails, business emails, where she was clearly making decisions above her pay grade, signing off on contracts, handling client communications. A sticky note was attached. Insurance policy. Try to destroy me, and these go to the State Bar Association. Wrongful termination suit filed Monday. See, I sank onto my kitchen floor, clutching the photos. Even in defeat, Charlotte was 10 steps ahead. She'd been positioning herself as indispensable to Marcus's business while documenting our affair. Now she could claim she was fired in retaliation for discovering misconduct, not for her own affair. My phone rang. Brian's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. What could I possibly say to him? That I'd cost him his daughter. That loving me might have destroyed his family. Lauren. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept either. I saw the papers, I whispered. What papers? Charlotte's lawsuit. It's online. The local business journal picked it up. Secretary sues prominent law firm after affair scandal. They don't name me directly, but everyone will know. Silence stretched between us. There's more, Brian said finally. Sarah's lawyer called this morning. They're filing for an emergency custody hearing. They want to suspend my visitation rights pending a full evaluation. I closed my eyes, feeling physically sick. Because of me, because of us, he corrected gently. Lauren, this isn't your fault alone, isn't it? I laughed bitterly. I was the married one. I was the one who should have said no. We both made choices, and now Emma pays for them. Tears rolled down my cheeks. When's the hearing? Next Friday. A week. In a week, a judge would decide if Brian was fit to see his daughter because he'd fallen in love with me. The thought made me want to disappear entirely. I should go, I said. Lauren, wait. Can we meet? We need to talk about this face to face. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, the coffee shop on 5th Street. 1 hour. I almost said no. Meeting him would only make this harder. But I couldn't leave things like this, suspended in limbo with so much unsaid. An hour later, I sat in a corner booth, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee I couldn't drink, when Brian walked in. He looked like he'd aged years in 3 days. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something fragile and desperate. He slid into the seat across from me, reaching for my hands before stopping himself. How are you holding up? He asked. I'm not, I admitted. Marcus is telling everyone I embezzled money to pay for hotel rooms. My partners are talking about suspension pending investigation, Charlotte's lawsuit claims. I created a hostile work environment by having an affair, and then firing her in retaliation. Jesus, Lauren, the worst part is some of it's true. I did fire her. I did have an affair. I did lie to everyone. I met his eyes, but I don't regret loving you. Something shifted in his expression, hope mixing with pain. Then don't give up on us, he said. Brian, you might lose Emma because of me, but I might lose her anyway. Sarah's been planning this for months. She's engaged to someone with money now, wants to relocate to Portland for his job. This affair just gave her the ammunition she needed. I stared at him. You never told me that, because I didn't want you to feel responsible for something that was already happening. He leaned forward. Sarah left me, remember? She walked away from our family. Now she wants back in because it's convenient. But if you weren't with me, if I wasn't with you, I'd still be the same father I am now. I'd still love Emma the same way. I'd still fight for her the same way. His voice was fierce. The only difference is I'd be miserable and alone instead of miserable and in love. I felt something crack open in my chest, a tiny sliver of hope. What are you saying? I'm saying we fight together. I get a better lawyer. You fight Charlotte's lawsuit. We show everyone that what we have is real, not some sordid affair that destroyed families. And if we lose, then we lose together. He reached across the table, covering my hands with his. Lauren, I know this is scary. I know it feels like the world is ending. But running away from each other won't fix anything. I looked down at our joined hands, thinking about Emma asking if I'd be her new mommy, thinking about the little girl who might grow up thinking her father chose a stranger over his family. What if loving me costs you everything? What if not loving you costs me everything that matters? But the question hung between us like a bridge I was afraid to cross. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Saw you with him again. This will be Exhibit A in Sarah's custody case. Hope he was worth it. I showed Brian the message, watching his jaw clench. He's having us followed, Brian said. Then we really are trapped. I pulled my hands free. Every time we're together, we give them more ammunition. So what do you want to do? Hide, pretend we don't love each other. I looked around the coffee shop where we'd fallen in love, where Everything had started with shared glances and hesitant conversations. Where I'd first felt alive in years. "I want to fight," I said quietly. "But I don't know how to win a war where loving you is the crime." Brian's eyes filled with something that looked like relief mixed with determination. "Then we learn," he said, "together." And the next morning, I was still staring at my coffee when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Lauren." The voice was small, shaky. "It's Emma." My heart stopped. "Emma, sweetie, how did you get my number?" "Daddy has it in his phone. I took it when he wasn't looking." She was crying. "Can you come over, please?" "Emma, where's your dad?" "He went to talk to the lawyers." "And Mommy's here, and she's being really mean. And I don't like her, and I want you to come back." The words tumbled out between sobs. I was already grabbing my keys. "I'm coming, sweetheart." "Where are you?" "At Daddy's apartment." "Mommy says I have to pack all my stuff because I'm going to live with her forever and never see Daddy again unless he stops seeing you." Her voice broke. "But I don't want to live with Mommy. She's scary when she's mad." 20 minutes later, I was knocking on Brian's door. Emma opened it, her face streaked with tears, still in her pajamas, even though it was almost noon. "Lauren," she threw herself into my arms. Behind her, Sarah emerged from the kitchen. She was exactly what I'd imagined, tall, blonde, perfectly put together, even at 11 in the morning. Her eyes were ice cold. "You must be the homewrecker," she said. I kept my arms around Emma. "I'm Lauren. I know exactly who you are. You're the married woman who's destroying my daughter's family." "Mommy, stop being mean to Lauren," Emma said, her small voice fierce. "She's nice, and she brings me strawberries, and she doesn't yell all the time like you do." Sarah's perfect composure cracked slightly. "Emma, go pack your things now." "No." Emma's grip on me tightened. "I called Lauren because Daddy is sad, and you're being mean, and I don't want to go with you." "Emma, I heard you on the phone last night," Emma continued, her voice getting stronger. "You told someone that you don't even want me. You just want to hurt Daddy for leaving you. You said I was a useful pawn." "What's a pawn, Lauren?" My heart shattered. It's a chess piece, sweetheart. Someone who gets moved around in a game. I don't want to be a chess piece. I want to stay with Daddy. And I want you to stay too." Sarah's face had gone white. "Emma, you misunderstood." "No, I didn't. You said lots of bad words and threw Daddy's picture across the room. The glass broke and everything." Emma looked up at me with those serious brown eyes that were so much like Brian's. "Are you going to leave Daddy because of me?" "Oh, sweetheart, no. Never because of you. Good, because I think you should marry him. He smiles more when you're around, and he makes better pancakes when he's happy." Sarah stepped forward. "That's enough. Emma, you're coming with me right now." Actually, she's not. We all turned. Brian stood in the doorway, his face thunderous. Behind him was a woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase. "This is my attorney, Janet Morrison," Brian said. "And Sarah, you're no longer welcome in my home. You can't keep me from my daughter. I can when you're using her as a weapon." Janet stepped forward. Mrs. Coleman, we have recordings of your phone calls discussing your manipulation tactics. We also have testimony from Emma's teacher about the emotional distress she's been showing since you started this custody battle. Emma ran to Brian, and he scooped her up. "Daddy, I don't want to go with Mommy. She said mean things about Lauren and about you, and she doesn't even want me." Brian's eyes found mine over Emma's head. "Lauren, can we talk? Privately?" I nodded, following him to his bedroom, while Janet dealt with Sarah in the living room. "I'm sorry," I said immediately. "I shouldn't have come here. I know it makes everything worse." "Stop." He set Emma down gently. "Go help Janet in the living room, sweetheart. Make sure Mommy doesn't take anything that isn't hers." When Emma left, Brian closed the door and pulled me into his arms. "Sarah's been using Emma to manipulate me for weeks," he said, coaching her to say she misses the family being together, promising her trips and toys if she'd tell me she wanted us to get back together. But Emma saw right through it. "Brian, I can't be the reason you lose your daughter. You're not. You're the reason I'm fighting for her." His hands cupped my face. "Do you know what Emma told me yesterday? She said she's never seen me as happy as I am when I'm with you. She said you make me laugh, and that you listen when she talks about her drawings." Tears spilled down my cheeks. She called me crying. She was so scared because Sarah told her that if I kept seeing you, she'd make sure Emma never saw me again. That's when I knew this wasn't about reconciliation or what's best for Emma. This is about control. I pulled back to look at him. "What does this mean?" "It means Sarah just lost her custody case. Janet's been documenting everything. The manipulation, the emotional abuse, the way Sarah's been putting Emma in the middle of adult conflicts." He smiled, and for the first time in days, it reached his eyes. "It means we don't have to choose between loving each other and protecting Emma. And Marcus, let him spread his rumors. Let Charlotte file her lawsuit. We'll fight it all, but we'll fight it together." He took my hands. "Lauren, I need you to know something. When Sarah first came back, part of me wondered if I should try to make it work for Emma's sake. But every time I imagined going back to that life, all I could think about was losing you." And my breath caught. "Brian, I love you. Not because you're an escape from my problems, or because you make me feel young again. I love you because you see Emma as a person, not an obstacle, because you make coffee taste better and rainy days feel like adventures. Because you're brave enough to fight for what we have even when everyone's telling you it's wrong." I stood there in his bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of his real life. Emma's drawings on the dresser, work shirts hanging in the closet, a life that was messy and complicated, and absolutely nothing like the fantasy I'd been living in hotel rooms. And I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. "I love you too," I said, "and I want this, all of it. The custody hearings, and the school plays, and the pancakes on Sunday morning. I want to be part of your real life, not just stolen moments." He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. From the living room, we heard Janet's voice. "Mrs. Coleman, You need to leave now, and you won't be having unsupervised contact with Emma until you complete a court-ordered psychological evaluation. A door slammed. Emma's voice called out, "Is she gone? Can Lauren stay for lunch?" Brian laughed against my lips, ready to be a stepmom. "Subscribe for more dramatic confessions like this one," I whispered, then louder. "I'm ready for whatever comes next, as long as it's with you." 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new house, watching Brian help Emma with her math homework at the dining table. The morning light streamed through windows we'd picked out together, illuminating a life I'd never imagined could be mine. "Lauren, can you help me with this word problem?" Emma called out, her voice bright and confident in a way that still made my heart swell. She'd started calling me her bonus mom after a particularly sweet conversation about how families could expand and grow in beautiful ways. "Of course, sweetheart." I wiped my hands on the dish towel, one Emma had picked out herself, covered in little sunflowers, and sat beside her. Brian caught my eye over her head, that same soft smile he'd been giving me for months now, the one that said, "Thank you for choosing us." The transition hadn't been seamless. There were nights Emma cried for routines that had been disrupted, moments when I questioned whether I was overstepping or not doing enough. Brian and I had learned to navigate bedtime stories and parent-teacher conferences, grocery shopping for a family of 3 instead of stolen hotel room service. But we'd also discovered magic in the mundane. Saturday morning pancakes had become our tradition, with Emma insisting on heart-shaped ones, and Brian pretending to be terrible at flipping them just to make her laugh. I'd learned that Emma preferred her sandwiches cut diagonally, and that she had an uncanny ability to sense when adults were keeping secrets. "The answer is 12, Emma announced proudly, showing me her work. "Perfect. You're getting so good at these." I kissed the top of her head, still amazed that this gesture felt as natural as breathing now. My phone buzzed with a text from my newest client. After leaving Marcus's firm, I'd started my own consulting business, working with small companies who needed strategic planning without the corporate politics. It was challenging, building something from scratch, but Brian had supported every late night and every moment of doubt. "Mom called again," Emma said casually, not looking up from her homework. She'd started calling Sarah Mom and me Bonus Mom, a distinction that had initially stung until I realized it came from love, not limitation. "What did she say?" Brian asked, his voice carefully neutral. Sarah's supervised visits had been going better lately, though she still occasionally tried to manipulate situations to her advantage. She wanted to know if I was excited about the school play. I told her yes, and that you and Lauren got me the prettiest dress for it. Emma beamed. She said that was nice. Progress, small but real. The school play, Emma was starring as the narrator in their production of The 3 Little Pigs, had become the center of our world for weeks. She'd been practicing her lines every night, performing them for us over dinner until we could recite them ourselves. Speaking of which, Brian said, checking his watch, we should probably head out soon. Don't want to be late for the final dress rehearsal. I grabbed Emma's costume bag while she ran upstairs to brush her teeth. Brian caught my hand as I passed him, pulling me close. "Thank you," he whispered against my ear. "For what?" "For staying. For choosing this chaos over something easier." I laughed softly. "Easier? Brian, this is the easiest I've ever done. Loving you, loving her, it's the most natural thing in the world." At the school, I watched Emma transform on stage, her confidence radiating as she delivered each line with perfect timing. Brian's hand found mine in the darkened auditorium, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that had become as familiar as my own heartbeat. "She's incredible," I whispered. "She gets that from her bonus mom," he whispered back. During intermission, as parents milled around the lobby, I noticed Charlotte approaching. My stomach tensed instinctively, but her expression was softer than I'd seen in months. "Lauren," she said quietly, "Emma looks beautiful up there. Thank you." I studied her face, looking for hidden agendas or sharp edges, but found only something that looked like regret. "I wanted to apologize," she continued, "for everything. The blackmail, the lawsuit, all of it. I was angry and hurt, and I took it out on you when really, I was just scared of being alone." I glanced at Brian, who nodded encouragingly. "We all made mistakes, Charlotte. What matters is that we're trying to do better now. Marcus and I were working things out in therapy. Turns out, we both had some growing up to do." She smiled ruefully. "I hope you're happy, Lauren. You deserve to be." After she walked away, Brian squeezed my hand. "That was gracious of you. Life's too short for grudges. Besides, she's right, I am happy." As the second act began, and Emma's final scene approached. As she delivered her closing lines about how the smartest pig built his house with love and patience, not just bricks, Brian suddenly stood up. "What are you doing?" I hissed, but he was already moving toward the stage. The audience murmured as he climbed the steps, but Emma just grinned and handed him the microphone like they'd planned this all along. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brian's voice filled the auditorium. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have something important to say." My heart stopped. 6 months ago, this little girl and I were just getting by. We had each other, and that felt like enough. But then someone very special came into our lives and showed us what a real family could look like. He looked directly at me, and I felt tears starting to fall. "Lauren Coleman, you've made our house a home. You've made Emma braver and me better. You've shown us that love doesn't divide, it multiplies." He dropped to one knee right there on the elementary school stage, pulling a ring box from his jacket pocket. Emma bounced excitedly beside him, clearly in on the plan. "Will you marry us? Will you be Emma's bonus mom officially and my wife forever?" The auditorium erupted in applause, but all I could hear was Emma shouting, "Say yes, Lauren. Say yes." I ran down the aisle and up onto the stage, not caring about the hundreds of eyes on us. Yes, I laughed through my tears. Yes to all of it. 3 months later, I stood in the bridal suite of the same church where Emma's play had been performed. Adjusting my dress one final time, Charlotte knocked on the door. Elegant in the soft blue dress I'd asked her to wear as my maid of honor. "Ready?" she asked, and I could see she meant it in every possible way. More than ready, as I walked down the aisle toward Brian and Emma, who was practically glowing in her flower girl dress. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, trapped in a marriage that was slowly killing her spirit, afraid to want more, afraid to risk everything for love. That woman couldn't have imagined this moment, couldn't have pictured herself choosing chaos over safety, expansion over containment, a love that demanded everything and gave back even more. Brian's eyes met mine, and in them I saw our future. More school plays and homework sessions, teenage drama and college applications, grandchildren who would call me bonus grandma and think that was perfectly normal. I saw a love that had started in betrayal, but built something completely new, something bigger and messier, and more beautiful than anything I'd thought possible. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but I was already home.